All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Good morning to you. It is the Mark Thompson Show here on YouTube and in podcast land. Thank you for being here. Mark, of course, has the day off. He is at KFI today and tomorrow, but we have some great things planned for you. Gil Gross should be along any moment to talk stories of the day. We'll have an interview with Bill Mann as well, press columnist, used to be with the Press Democrat. And Mark has a recorded interview with Bill Mann, so we'll have that round about 11:30. David K. Johnston will be here today, and there's a big news conference where Apple is unveiling its new products, including the new iPhone. Jefferson Graham is monitoring all of that, and he'll be along at 12:30 to talk about what happened at the press conference and what the latest is with Apple. So I would like to ask you, taking care of some business here, to click the thumbs up. If you could click the like. If you're here and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the show as well. All of those things help us as we continue to kind of keep it rolling on forward. So a lot is happening. Oh, I should say Tony is here. Hi, Tony.
Hey, and Gil just popped in the lobby.
I see him. Hello. Okay. Well, thank you for being here, Tony, and thanks for keeping me on track. I appreciate you as well.
Do what I can.
Yeah. So let's bring in Gil right away, because I knew that Mark wasn't going to be here, and there's really, I don't know. I will say I've had Gil on the show before, and I just enjoy having these conversations with him so much. It reminds me of standing in the old KGO newsroom on Front Street and talking about the stories of the day. And so anytime I can get Gill Gross on the show, I will absolutely take that opportunity. Hi, Gill Gross.
Hey, Kim. Hey, Tony.
Hi. There you are in your little studio at your house.
Yeah. Well, actually down the road from my house, but yeah.
Oh, look at you with a separate location, a little lair.
I know. I bought a house that had a 1,600-foot recording studio. Look at me.
Look at you go. Wow. That's like a 1,600-foot recording studio. That's like a whole nother residence.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is there a bedroom in there? Like, could you sleep down there if you wanted to?
There could be. There's an assistant producer's room that was built. This was built by a friend of mine, John Kurzweig. John produced Eagle Eye Cherry, produced Creed, and we're still good friends. He and his wife split, so they sold the house. But he built this magnificent studio, and it's great because John can still work here.
Yeah,
because we're buddies. So
and
I've
so
got my area, and he's got his. Yeah, this
is great. Well, welcome to the show, Gil Gross. I didn't expect to ask you about this, but it just happened, and so I shall.
Does it start with the letter I?
It starts with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy
saying, impeachment, but okay,
impeachment, the impeachment inquiry into President Biden, and we know it's political, right? Election season is here.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to deflect attention from everything happening with Trump and company.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no evidence, there's no proof. So what's the point?
The point is Kevin McCarthy is trying to keep his job, and basically the MAGA right has demanded this, both for politics and also as kind of revenge. And they're looking at this. The interesting thing about this is there's a number of people from the House Freedom Caucus, which is, to the far right.
Those are the crazies, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and company.
Well, she's not in the House Freedom Caucus.
Oh, she got kicked
out, right?
Yeah.
And they're actually mad at her.
Yeah.
Some members of the House Freedom Caucus are against this move because they say, look, there's no evidence. We're just going to look foolish.
Yeah.
And so don't do this. If you find some evidence that Biden got money through his son's connections, sure, but you don't have it. And this is just going to tie up committees in an election year when people are looking for the House to do something, because McCarthy is talking about tying up oversight, judicial, and House Ways and Means for this deal. And so basically any chance to get any kind of meaningful legislation in an election year is now over.
Yeah.
It's done. It's just forget about it. So this is something that's even split a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, I don't get how they can move forward without any proof. I think you see Jim Jordan over and over again and his big claims of, oh, we have the bombshell. Here's the witness that's coming forward with the here's to make the dramatic connection between the president and his son and whatever. It's never materialized, and Jordan's the one who ends up looking like an ass.
The right has a history of this, and you remember during the Clinton years, instead of just being satisfied with, hey, Bill Clinton is stooping people he shouldn't be stooping. Mm-hmm. I mean, which was enough of a scandal in itself.
Right.
But no, they had to go, well, the Clintons are having witnesses to all of this extramarital affairs of Clinton murdered, which never made any sense because the women were running around. They were going on talk shows. They were... One of them was performing in Old Calcutta at a dinner theater in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it's like, why would you kill people who knew about it when the women are running around and still saying it?
Right.
So, this is something that's going on. And by the way, there are people on the left like this too, I might as well mention it today, 9/11. It's not enough that Bush and Cheney cost us trillions of dollars and tons of American and foreign lives with needless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What they had to say, well, 9/11 was brought down by bombs placed in the buildings, and it was brought down by the Bush people. And it's like, Bush and Cheney did more than enough horrible things. Why stick them with something they didn't actually do and dilute your case against them other things? But there are people, including friends of mine who are just, they're attached to this and they have all these things, and you go, no, that's not true because of, this, that, or the other, and the claim. And it doesn't matter. So that's some of what's going on here. There is one evidentiary thing, which is interesting, which could either put an end to this or give us the first evidence, which is now they will be able to subpoena banking records. So either there is money that flowed into Joe Biden's accounts from Hunter Biden's dealings, or there isn't.
Right.
And now they'll be able to subpoena the banking records. So either they'll end up with egg in their face, or I think it's unlikely, or they'll have something.
Yeah. It's frustrating to me. I don't know.
It's frustrating because this is right now based on nothing except Hunter Biden's stupidity.
Right.
And listen, there's a lot of stupidity in criminal action to go with Hunter Biden. I mean, there's this country has a horrible history of presidential relatives trying to make money off of the fact that they have a relative who's president of the United States. You had Nixon's brothers who took what was supposed to be campaign money, took $100,000 each from Bibi Rebozo, which was illegal. You had Billy Carter, who wanted to become a representative of Libya. People made excuses for him that, well, at least drunk, they even named a beer after him. And people are making the same excuse for Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, not the most noble creature in the world. So the question here is not so much him, it's did he involve his father in any of this? Now, Joe did something really stupid. Joe appeared on some of these calls before they got down to business and gave the impression that he might be a part of whatever dumbass I'm on drugs thing Hunter was doing. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
He probably did nothing illegal, but in trying to back his son up there as then vice president of the United States, he gave an appearance which he should not have done. But whether he actually did anything illegal, there's been absolutely no evidence of him doing anything illegal.
Well, listening to you, I'm struck by the fact that it seems that there's trouble, Democrats, or not necessarily this is the same thing, but people who are logical and reasonable and able to think about all aspects of an issue will say, yeah, Hunter Biden is doing some bad things, did some things that didn't make, sense, all these things. Like, can look at the situation logically. If this was a Trump son Nope, nothing. He did nothing wrong. Circle the wagons. There would be
Well,
no admission of anything at all. So why is it that we can look at it and see, yes, some mistakes were made here, but on the Republican side, there's never an admission of anything?
Because that's become a Donald Trump cult. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's not the Republican Party. It's not the Republican Party. I know. Look, my personal politics, now that I'm not a day-to-day objective journalist, I can say, I think people who listen to me on KGO, knew we're definitely liberal and progressive. Did that mean as a reporter, there were times you had to go, really? To some guy on your side? Just seriously? Well, you got to put it out there and give it the same treatment as you would anybody else. And I knew plenty of conservative journalists. People don't believe there are such things. There are, who were capable of the same thing with their side. The party's become a Trump cult. And if you compare, and by the way, I'm not a fan of What About? Because if Hunter Biden did illegal things, he should be punished, whatever the punishment is.
Agreed.
For the things that he seems to have done in terms of tax avoidance and not registering as a foreign lobbyist, these are things that generally get you a fine and not even prison time.
Yeah.
You compare the money involved there with what Jared Kushner did, which is take his job of negotiating Mideast peace and turn it into business contacts in which he's made not millions, billions, between $2 and $3 billion. His fund, which has nearly $3 billion in it, there's something like 5% that comes from domestic sources. All the rest is from people he was dealing with, supposedly as a representative of the United States in terms of trying to, bring peace and negotiate deals between Israel and the Middle East. So, it pales. But yes, right now we live in a world defined on social media as my side never does anything wrong and the other side never does anything right.
Yep.
And of course, most of what you get is BS from that.
Let's move to this other topic. This is wild and crazy, and I don't know if a lot of people have heard of it. It's a story that was uncovered a couple of days ago by Politico, and it involves Ginni Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
So the decision in 2010, the Citizen United case, it loosens up restrictions on campaign spending, right?
Right.
And allows anonymous donor money to go to nonprofit groups.
Yes.
So according to this Politico article, Ginni Thomas and her friend, Leonard Leo, decide then that they're going to be the leaders of this conservative movement and open up all of these nonprofits type of organizations, get all of this money, and basically give it to their buddies.
And themselves.
Little for me,
themselves.
Little for you, some for everybody.
An important part of the story is that Kellyanne Conway, for instance, funneled tons of money that supposedly went to Republican polling and gave it to Ginni Thomas. And part of the problem here is that nonprofits only have to report their top donors. And they basically can get out of, generally it's top 5 over a certain amount. And I think it's top 5 over $100,000. So basically you can hide tons of money that you give to people for doing nothing.
And they gave it to legal scholars to devise theories to challenge liberal precedents.
Especially one dean at Boston University got a lot of it. Yeah.
Helped elect state attorneys general willing to apply those theories, launched lavish campaigns for conservative judicial nominees who would cite those theories in rulings from the bench. Right.
Some of this, by the way, not the money that people pocketed. Some of this is perfectly legal.
Yeah.
It may not be moral or ethical, but this is politics we're talking about. And a lot of it was, in fact, perfectly legal. And in fact, when I've read some of the accounts of this skullduggery over the years, some of my first thoughts were, Well, Democrats could have done this. Democrats could have started committees, and Democrats could have raised money and funneled it to people and started things. Democrats could have come up with more redistricting that would have benefited them when they were in power in states. They just never do.
Why? I mean, it seems like if somebody plays dirty against you for long enough, that you would then learn the same rules that they're using to get around having to, disclose where the money comes from, or like, why? I just don't understand how we can sit by and let people play dirty like this and do nothing. And now look at the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade is gone, and it's all an orchestrated plot using this dark money.
Yes, and some of it is we're going to play the rules and we're going to be good people. Some of it is just the Republicans have more billionaires on their side. They're for lower taxes for billionaires. Trump made good in that. He did his tax cuts, most of which went to people that didn't need tax cuts.
Right.
There's just a lot of that, but some of it is, look, Will Rogers, so we're talking a century ago, said, I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat. And not much has changed.
It's crazy. I don't know how this is, how we allow this to go on. I mean, it seems like this is everything we should be fighting against. Having money that we don't know who's donating it. We don't know where it's coming from. We have people that are able to keep themselves hidden because they don't have to say, who's on the boards of these nonprofits or who's actually behind it. It's all very cloak and dagger, it seems.
And the IRS has been deprived of their investigatory power by Republicans taking money away in appropriations from the IRS, which has been a wonderful two-edged sword for them. For the one thing, people hate the IRS. Even people that, get most of their money back at the end of the year hate the IRS. But the real reason for that is nonprofit charities are not allowed to indulge in politics.
Yeah.
And if the IRS enforced this, a lot of these nonprofits mentioned in the Leonard Leo and Ginni Thomas article would have had to cough up a lot of tax money because what they're doing is basically under tax law illegal. But the IRS does not have the people to enforce this anymore. And Republicans made sure of that. So that's one of the big problems, that basically you have nonprofits who are involved in politics and giving money to politicians who aren't supposed to be able to do that. Worse, in the case of Leonard Leo, you have charities being used for personal enrichment, which is also illegal. But again, there's no enforcement.
No enforcement at all. And such a huge impact on courts and decisions. And I just, I
mean, look at the take something that is another story in the news this week. Mark Meadows trying to move his case from Georgia to the federal government. There's two reasons Mark Meadows wants to do that. A, if it's a Georgia conviction, if Trump does get reelected, he can't pardon him.
Right.
Can't pardon him for a state crime. But the other one is he's trading an enforceable law, which is Georgia's racketeering law that he's being prosecuted under, and also trying to force a public official to do something against the public interest, which was, part of the I just need 11,000 more votes deal. But also, this is interesting. Meadows is basically saying, yes, I know as chief of staff, but I was involved in electioneering. Now, violation of the Hatch Act. But why is he willing to say I violated the Hatch Act? There's no enforcement of the Hatch Act. Nothing happens to you if you violate the Hatch Act. If you violate the Hatch Act, somebody goes, it's like grandma, like you've been a bad boy. Am I still getting a lollipop, grandma? Oh, of course you are.
No consequence, no repercussion.
Zero consequence, zero repercussion.
But question about this case, this dark money case with Ginni Thomas. She's married to Supreme Court Justice.
Yes.
She's personally benefiting both ideologically and financially from decisions that her husband is making. And they're all doing it in cahoots is what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
Once you start looking into this. So wouldn't that be illegal to have your wife, which is really your own pocketbook, right? Depending on if they commingle their money, I don't know. But it would seem like if your wife is being enriched by decisions that you have made, then you are personally being enriched by decisions that you are making because of your place on the Supreme Court. Isn't there some illegality to that?
It's funny. Somebody asked me this week, said, well, what about the case of Trump saying that the federal judge in his case should recuse themselves from the case? And I said, well, the judge isn't going to allow it. That'll be appealed then. And they said, well, won't that go to the Supreme Court? I said, there's no way that's going to the Supreme Court, because Roberts is not going to let the whole question of recusal come up in a case with Clarence Thomas sitting right there. After all these cases he should have recused himself on. So that's just not going to happen. That's a bad look. They'll take whatever is the highest court decision before the Supreme Court, if it even gets appealed up to the Supreme Court, and they'll just let that stay without doing anything. In terms of illegality, it would depend on whether you could attach that money to things that the Thomases have used. Obviously, she supplemented her husband's lifestyle with that money. Here's where the argument may have a problem in court, and also maybe a waste of money for the people who supplied it. Clarence Thomas is not one of these cases like a David Souter or an Earl Warren, who started out on one side of the political fence and drifted to another once they became a Supreme Court justice. Right. You know, Thomas was always a hard line conservative. I can't think of a single case that Thomas has ruled on where he might have ruled something differently if he had not, gotten this money. Yeah. That may be their best argument in court. I mean, plainly, he got money from people who had an interest in cases. Plainly, he should have recused himself in these cases. Plainly, he has no ethics whatsoever. Right. Legally. That all said, there's no requirement for them to have ethics. It's a lifetime job. I mean, that's it. And in terms of impeachment,
it's a lifetime of having your hand out. Grift, grift, grift.
That's what it is. In terms of impeachment, it's one of the reasons why people like Alito are saying, no, Congress can't make any rulings about the Supreme Court. Plainly BS. Congress makes decisions about the Supreme Court all the time, including changing the number of people on the Supreme Court. Yeah. So that's plainly nonsense. But still, you're never going to get the 2/3 in the Senate that you would need to impeach a Supreme Court justice. So it's just not going to happen. So unethical, absolutely. Immoral, yes. Illegal, I can make a good case for it. Actual consequence of that, can't think of any.
Wow.
Well, as long as there's no consequence,
then they keep doing it. Nothing happens. And people should be outraged by that. I feel they should be outraged by that. Reading that story and seeing what's happening, it's outrageous. Yeah, there are justices that change over time. Like Alito was always conservative, but I remember, because I did the network specials when he was picked, and I talked to a lot of his colleagues on the courts in New Jersey, and they were all telling me, oh, this is a guy who's going to put the law first. He doesn't, he's not going to play politics. Yes, he's conservative, but he's going to decide on the law. They saw him as another Sandra Day O'Connor type, conservative, but playing by the rules. And Alito's an interesting case because I think it was because he became much more religious, which of course can go in any direction depending on your religion, but it became much more a part of his life, and it became much harder and drifted away. When you read his decisions, drifted away from lawmaking to just kind of doing a talk show in the Supreme Court. But I don't think Thomas, if they hadn't paid him a nickel, I don't think Thomas would have changed one decision of his. This is who he's always been. This is it. So should he be profiting? No. Was it necessary to buy him off? No. He would have made the same choices. but he wouldn't have, that the people that are benefiting from it wouldn't have benefited. And I think for them,
Yes.
it's all about that, getting what they can out of it all. You know,
I think it's for them, it's getting what they can, and they feel better giving him money. I don't think it was necessary to give him money. I think they've thrown a lot of money away from him, but it's made them feel more sure or good. Thomas very rarely deviates. He's not a guy like Roberts, who, or even surprisingly, Amy Coney Barrett, who occasionally goes, well, I'd rather this, but there's no way. He's always been who he is. And yeah, I don't see that they've gotten anything for their money.
yeah. Okay, let's move to what a case that you had already referenced, which is former President Trump trying to get rid of Judge Tanya Chutkan in this federal case in Washington, D.C. about interfering in the election. The Trump team is saying Chutkan has already prejudged him. And so that's because she has prejudged him, allegedly. She needs to recuse herself from this election obstruction case.
She's unfortunately made a case for them. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because she's going to deny it, and recusals generally don't go anywhere. And as I said, depending what the higher courts decide, I think the Supreme Court, with what's flying around Clarence Thomas and other justices, is going to stay as far away from making some kind of recusal decision as they possibly can. That said, the judge said some unnecessary things, like in one of the sentencing, blind loyalty to one person who, by the way, remains free to this day. Didn't say Trump by name, but, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know what I mean. Everybody knew what she meant. She made a couple of statements like that. And it's, she gave them grounds. Now, whether it's enough grounds for recusal, I don't think so. But did she give them reason for getting it at least before an appeals court? Yeah, she probably did.
Yeah. Yeah, I that worries me because I want it to be so ironclad. And so if she recuses herself, then who is the likely person to come in and take over? Is it a Trump appointee?
She won't recuse herself.
Yeah.
It would need a higher court to do that. I don't see any way in hell that she's going to recuse herself. If a higher court does that, it's going to be whoever's turn it is.
Yeah.
It could be a Trump appointee. It could not be.
Let's move to Mark Meadows, who you also referenced earlier.
He sounds like a suburb, doesn't it? Let's move to Mark Meadows.
Mark Meadows. It
Come
sounds
on, kid,
so
let's
nice.
move to Mark Meadows.
You know, green
got a
grass
community pool
blowing in the breeze and
Absolutely.
wildflowers. Yeah. No. Mark Meadows, he says, listen, I want my case out of Georgia and I want it in federal court. And I'm worried that before this can be appealed, I'll already be convicted and incarcerated. That it's going to happen so fast in Georgia. So he wants the Georgia judge to put the decision not to allow the case to change venue to federal court on hold so that it can't move forward and he can't be convicted before this is even heard. Is that reasonable?
You know, try not to commit so many crimes in so many different districts. You know, I mean, it's you rob a bank, you kidnap somebody, and now you've got a federal kidnapping trial, and then you've got, you know, the bank robbery trial under state law probably, and all of this. And it's just try not to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see anybody giving him this. I think 5 of the 19 have applied for this. And of course, as mentioned earlier, one of the things he's trying to do is get this to federal court in hopes that Trump gets reelected. And, you know, right now the polls are tight. And Trump gets reelected and everybody gets pardoned and goes home and that's it. The other thing is, as I said, if he got away with the acting in federal capacity thing, it would mean that he violated the Hatch Act because as White House Chief of Staff, he would have been strictly against the law for him to be involved in politics, in the political end of this. But as I said, the Hatch Act has no enforcement. So he would rather be found, oh, you're guilty of enforcing the Hatch Act. What does that mean? Nothing.
What
Nothing.
is
Put it on your
wrong
resume. I violated the Hatch Act.
with the United States of America? I am telling you. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I saw this story and I was surprised by it because I hadn't seen any of these allegations. And maybe my head's in a rock and maybe I'm just Trump, Trump, Trump all the time because I'm just still so hurt in my own heart by the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I expected anything differently, but just sad for my country. But I saw this facts first fact-checking story on CNN.
Yeah.
A source which I generally trust. And it goes through these, I'll call them lies or falsehoods that President Biden has made. And the last one was that he falsely claimed he was at Ground Zero when he said, I was there the next day.
Yeah, it was
Which
9
would
days later that he showed
lead
up.
someone to believe that he was there on September 12th. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's 9 days later. But they go on and they list all of these false claims that President Biden has made, including that he had witnessed a bridge collapse in Pittsburgh in 2022. He visited it 6 hours after it collapsed. He did not witness it collapse.
He witnessed the collapsed bridge, but he was not there to actually see
it
the bridge
fall.
collapse. Yeah, absolutely.
He apparently said his grandfather died in the same hospital just hours or days before his own birth. But his grandfather died more than a year before he was born at that hospital.
In a different state, not even, much less the same hospital.
I mean, so what's with it? He also apparently had a conversation with an Amtrak conductor, but at the time of the story, the Amtrak conductor in question was dead.
Yeah.
So that couldn't have happened. Are we looking at a George Santos style lying, or is it just a memory thing, or what's happening with Biden?
So there's two Joe Bidens. I've covered Joe for a long, long time. I've interviewed him many times, not since he became president, but I interviewed him many times over the years. And in a way, this may be more to the point because he was young. So this has nothing to do with age. So there's two Joes. Mm-hmm. There's Joe. I think of Casey Stengel when I think of Joe. And I'll tell you why in a moment. There's Joe, the president, vice president, senator. Hardworking, and knows every fact there is about situations. And when he's in that mode, he is right on target. He has his facts together and all of that. Then there has always been Uncle Joe. And Uncle Joe is like your uncle who wants to tell a good story. And by the way, I'm not making excuses for this because this is something as a politician, especially as a president, you should not do.
Be accurate, right?
Yes, but he's always had this Uncle Joe thing where he starts telling stories. And the stories, much as Uncle Joe at the Thanksgiving dinner table, always got like a little better. And everybody's like sitting around the table who knows the real story and shaking their heads. and they're not things like, and I won the war and things like that. They're, the kind of things that, say, Santos told.
Right.
They're embellishments.
Like spinning a yarn.
He's always been a yarn spinner. I don't know what that is. I don't know why he does it. He likes to have an audience, like get into the story, and it's better that he's there and things like that. Trump does this too. Trump said he saw, the Twin Towers fall from his apartment. There's no way you can see them from that apartment. He said he saw Muslims celebrating in the streets of Jersey City.
Never happened. Yeah.
But Joe does this. It's generally harmless. It's not about policy, but they are mistruths, or you can say lies because they're not true, which is kind of the definition of a lie. I don't know. He's always done this. It's not an age thing, if that makes anybody feel any better. It's always been Uncle Joe. I've mentioned Casey Stengel before, and I'll just say this briefly because fewer and fewer viewers and listeners are going to remember Casey Stengel. But Casey Stengel was manager of the New York Yankees for years, later the New York Mets. And Stengel, before reporters, before the public, he never wanted to give anybody a straight answer. He felt it was none of their business. He felt if reporters asked, what was that pitch that Mantle hit? He didn't want to tell them what the pitch was because then the pitcher, if he forgot, won't throw it again. Why would he say something like that? Unlike today when everything's analyzed. And so he would do double talk, and everybody would think, well, that's Casey. He's a little out of his head. And every player I ever interviewed, and I worked at the station of the Yankees for a few years, told me, yeah, that wasn't him in the dugout. In the dugout, there was no double talk. In the dugout, he was specific. He'd have a problem with names sometimes, but other than that, he was specific and had a reason for things and had a temper and all of that. There were two Caseys. There was the storyteller Casey. You never knew whether it was true or could even understand it at times. And then there was Casey in the dugout. There's Uncle Joe, and there's Senator, Vice President, and President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I don't know why he does it. I don't know him in any way that I could do even pretend psychology on it. But yes, it's true. He does these things where he says he's been somewhere where he wasn't. He did it when he's young. He does it when he's old.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. It's not good. And it's a bad look because people are questioning his age.
Right.
All I can tell you is he did it when he was 40 as well, but it's not great.
No. Let's keep with, lastly, speech and how important speech is. I know that former President Trump has stirred up the pot by saying bullets will fly, right? We heard him say that. And now you have much less, unimportant in the scheme of things, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is talking about seceding. And she is saying that President Biden's border policies are traitorous, and she's already called for a national divorce. And now she says if the Biden administration refuses to stop the invasion of the cartel-led human and drug trafficking into our country, that states should consider seceding from the union. Is all of this speech with stirring up violence from Trump and then stirring up some type of secession thing? Last time we had a secession, we had a war. Is all this dangerous? Should there be consequences for this type of speech, or should we just be allowed to spout this kind of stuff and everyone go, all right, well, that's our opinion?
It's free speech. You got to be allowed to spout it. One of my mentors and a friend, obviously many years ago, is Fred Friendly, one of the great leaders of CBS News. And Fred wrote a book called Minnesota Rag, and it was about this anti-Semitic Minnesota newspaper that a major free speech journalism case was based on. And journalists held their nose and came to the defense of this crappy POS thing because it's free speech. Should she be allowed to say it? Yeah. I mean, and besides that, look, I'll tell you, this upsets my wife, who is upset by the idea. And we were talking about this a number of years ago, and I said, well, look, no country lasts forever. Mm-hmm. There's never been a country in the history of the world that lasted forever. That's why people still read Edward Gibbon's The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Well, maybe I don't read it that much anymore, but it's, it's why it was read for so many years.
Yeah.
And might there come a point where the United States breaks up, where everybody kind of goes, you know what, where I live would be a nice place without you? Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. There's no reason to think it's not possible. Countries do this. If you're a baby boomer, you were born when the sun really never set on the British Empire. Now, if it sets in Scotland, that's over. It. We're not so sure about Scotland.
Yeah.
So, is she saying it for dangerous reasons to try and stir up violence? Yes, I believe she is. If she speaks specifically of violence, you might have some kind of case. If she talks about armed insurrection, you would have a case. If she's just talking about secession is something that's possible, it's sure. And world history shows us it's something, probably not in our lifetime. The main problem for her has to do with, great, so if the United States takes all of its defense bases and shuts them down in states that secede, and you're on your own, somebody attacks you, good luck. We're not firing any missiles from any submarines for you. That becomes a real problem, and the Social Security checks stop, and the welfare checks stop, and all of that, all of the money that funds programs that comes from blue states like California, like New York and Wall Street, that money stops. Is anybody going to think in the practicalities that this is something good? No. But remember, here in California, I'm saying here in California for you, I'm in New Mexico right now. There have been many moves by people, especially in, very northern California, to secede from the state. And one bozo industrialist had the idea we were going
state of Jefferson, right?
Yes. And one bozo industrialist with lots of money said we should break into 6 states because the bureaucracy was killing us. In fact, it was on KGO. I said, so explain to me how having 6 governors and 6 legislatures and 6 secretaries of education and 6 of everything and is going to bring us less bureaucracy.
Yeah. And
there was just silence. He had never even thought of it. It was just stuff to say. He had no practical plan for doing this. And it's the same thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene's secession. It's what happens when there's no federal troops to call on, you're calling on your state militias to patrol the borders and things like that. And who's paying for all of this? And she has no, it's just stuff.
Good luck in a natural disaster as well. You're getting no government funding, nothing.
Yes, they'll have to develop their own FEMA, all of that. You look at, oh my God, what's going on in Maui? I have friends over there working in the work to try and save that. And you've got EPA in there before FEMA can ever even get into real things, because not only you still have about 60 bodies distributed, but you have most of the houses that are over 50 years old. There's a ton of asbestos and other things. It's all in that ash. They have to apply an adhesive to all of that ash, put it into iron drums. And people aren't going to get back to their homes. They want to do that now. You understand that, but they're not going to be able to safely do that without exposing themselves to cancer until way into next year. These are the kinds of things, if you secede, you're going to have to develop all of these things to do them yourself. And a lot of the states interested in secession, like Mississippi, they don't have the money to do anything like that.
Wren writes, the immigration issues aren't going to go away. If you secede, they would primarily fall on seceded states. So she's right. You want to secede from the union because of immigration issues or, what you perceive as the wrong way to handle it. You're not going to have the money to handle it, or maybe the manpower at the border to handle what you feel needs to be handled.
Yeah. They're not going to be able to do that. Not going to be able to separate out immigrants who want to legally come here, who are desperately needed. By the way, and you've talked to conservative business people, and they're saying we need immigrants. We don't have anybody to do it. There's certain jobs that we don't have the money to have anybody to do. You've got that, and you've got which is major. But you've got the major problem we've always had with the drug crisis, and you see that in fentanyl and all of these other things. You saw in opioids, which were legally manufactured here in the United States. The problem is the demand side. Having people hopping over a border fence doesn't stop people who are bringing it by boat or down to Canada, which is the longest unprotected border in the world. It just doesn't do anything. So if you want to sit down, put politics aside and have both sides figure out what to do about these things, and mainly on the drug side, how to stop the demand. Because as long as there's billions of dollars in the demand, people are going to find a way to do it.
I said that was the last question, but I got this from Lori, who wants me to ask you, and I had intended to as well, but clearly I could talk to you all day long, Gil Gross. She wants me to ask you what the public climate is like in New Mexico regarding the ban on carrying guns in certain areas. And I think she's referring to Albuquerque, where the governor says no guns in open carry in Albuquerque because of a rash of gun violence for at least 30 days, right?
Yeah, we have open carry here in New Mexico, where I'm speaking to you from. I'm in Santa Fe. And except for federal buildings and schools. Mm-hmm. And what she is putting in is declaring this a public health emergency because of a number of shootings, especially of children, that have happened recently, that would stop you from even open carry in public areas and state property and schools and parks, except for law enforcement, of course, and licensed security guards. And you have to have a certain level of violence for this to kick in, and the only place that has that is Albuquerque, Bernalillo County. So that's the only place that would affect it. All of the pro-gun groups are already in court. I think there's at least 3 separate suits against this. And Governor Lujan said, look, they may be successful. I want 30 days to kind of let things calm down and see if we can figure out, how to deal with this.
Right.
But is it constitutional after the Supreme Court made that decision on the Second Amendment, which, by the way, was probably, if you read the Second Amendment, which I don't think they did, wrong. In fact, Robert Bork, going back to the days when you could talk to people on the other side, Robert Bork and I used to talk all the time. We disagreed on almost everything, but we had great conversations. And Bork surprised me one day because I asked him about Second Amendment, and he said, no, Second Amendment is only about militias. It has nothing to do with personal rights at all. And he said, hey, I wish it did. I'm pro-gun. But he said, just it doesn't. And if Congress wants it to, they need to pass a law or a constitutional amendment saying that it does. And that was Robert freaking Bork. But look, we've had a 5th person's just been arrested in the shooting of a 5-year-old. There were some people that stole a couple of Kias, drove by a trailer, and just for the hell of it, it wasn't like, retribution or for a gang or something. Right. They shot this trailer full of bullets and killed a 5-year-old who was sleeping. There was an 11-year-old. This was a road rage case right near Isotopes Park, which is where our AAA minor league baseball team is, that plays and beats the Sacramento River Cats all the time. And it's a great ballpark. I go there all the time. Yeah. And this road rage shooting broke out, and this SUV, the people in this SUV had fired 17 shots at this car. The boy's aunt was critically wounded. She's still in critical and not stable. And an 11-year-old was killed. So that's what led to this. It's really problematical because the governor has control over state police, but the Albuquerque PD, interestingly enough, even though they get shot at all the time, said they won't enforce this. And the sheriff said that he won't support it either. Wow. So he won't tell his people. He said, I'm afraid of civil liability cases because it's so plainly against the Supreme Court decision of the Second Amendment. So, we'll see what happens. But it looks like it's probably not going to be enforceable.
Gil Gross, I adore you. I really thank you for coming on the Mark Thompson
Show. Oh, go on with you now.
I'm going to have you back. You know I will. Thank you for staying overtime. You've been here for a while, and I kept you over because I just love talking to you so much. So thank you for having the conversation, and I hope to see you really soon. It's
always a pleasure, Kim. Say hi to Mark and
I will.
And Tony, and thank you. Now I got to go back to work.
Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, any projects I should ask you about that you want to publicize? Anything you're working on?
Besides the next CBS special, which isn't until Thanksgiving,
okay.
I'm one of the producers of a new podcast. I don't want to say too much about it. It's about homegrown terrorism. I'm doing mainly the writing on this. I'm not going to be on the air. That's mainly what I do now. Is put these things together. And I'm very excited. We just got a major grant for it, and we've knocked out 2 of the first 8 episodes, but I want to wait until there's an official release date on this. But
when you have something to publicize, you come on back.
You got it.
Awesome. Thanks, Gil Gross. Have a great day.
Bye, Kim.
Bye. How fortunate am I to have this award-winning journalist, amazing commentator on the show, Gil Gross. Right now, though, I want to get to Bill Mann. Bill Mann, a columnist, journalist himself, he had a great conversation with Mark Thompson, a pre-recorded conversation. It's short, but we wanted to put it on the air today. After that, we will talk to David K. Johnston and Jefferson Graham about what happened at the Apple News Conference today. That's all on the Mark Thompson Show coming up.
You know, I love it. I can't believe it. Bill Mann is going to join us, the longtime media critic. Now he's given up his life in the Bay Area. And now he's in some witness relocation program. I don't know. You're in the Northwest somewhere. Yeah, very good of you to. You have a kind of a look at that spiritual rug on the wall there. Are you doing work on the side as well?
I am. Vishnu with you, my friend.
Oh, Vishnu with you. Come on. Yeah. Bill's side hustle as a shaman.
That's it. Oh, yeah.
So, Bill Mann, you have watched media for so much of your career. And in your media watching world and participating in media, being a writer for so many different publications along the way, you have cross-pollinated with Rupert Murdoch. And we were kind of chatting the other day, and you said, you know, I because we were talking about the power of Rupert Murdoch. And Rupert Murdoch continues to be a powerful figure. Wouldn't you say he helped influence the political discourse here for the last 20 years?
Oh, absolutely. He brought his right-wing down-market newspapers to North America, you know?
Right, right. And that's a good reminder, because we think of him as Fox News Channel, but you're referring to almost the tabloid aspect to political discourse that you find in the New York Post or in any of these papers that he really that helped really seize control of what was being focused on when it came to politics.
He used his newspapers to leverage buying into television. When he came to Australia, into England, he slithered into England, as one of my editors said. He bought the News of the World, which has gone out of business. He bought the Sun, and I was doing some freelancing at the time for the National Perspirer.
That's National Enquirer, is that it?
Perspirer, that's what they call it, the Enquirer. And my editor there was a guy named Mike Hoy, and he was on the Enquirer, and he assigned me stories like, "Your salad dressing reveals your personality." I actually did that story. And one day, Mike disappeared, and Murdoch had grabbed him from across the Atlantic to take over the Times of London, which he had just bought, which was called the Thunderer, which was considered, you know, the big newspaper. You know, that was before the New York Times. And I think you were in England at the time that happened. I think I touched base with you in England.
Oh, I don't even remember that. That's great. That's wild. I personally cross-pollinated with some Murdoch people because Murdoch bought the Fox stations, and I went from the Bay Area to work at the Fox-owned and operated station, and he put in charge of those newsrooms often people who came out of print. Yep. You made me think of it when you talked about the fact that he's plucking this executive editor from this property and putting him in another. And so you had guys who really were in the print business who were working in television. It was interesting. But anyway. So
Murdoch, you know, his Sun of London was famous for its page 3 quote unquote titty pictures. You know, he was down market and definitely right wing and that's just his background, and he passed that culture onto his television people.
So what are your thoughts then on what do we know about Murdoch and about his, he's so much has evolved through those years. As you say, he leveraged the power he had from print into massive power with broadcast. I say broadcast just sort of as a generic term. He has Sky TV, as you know, it's a dominant satellite service through Europe and programming service through Europe and Australia.
Yeah. When he bought the Wall Street Journal, and that was a big thing that went on for a couple of years, he couldn't waste any time running a picture in his newspapers of Justice Elena Kagan playing with a lesbian softball team. And you said, uh-oh, here goes the Journal. You know, that's, you know, it just never fails with him. And, you know, the sad thing is he's 93 years old, and his mother didn't die till she was 102. That's really sad.
He'll be around for a while. Look,
he'll be around for a while.
He's still got he's got the romance. He was with Jerry Hall, right? That ended.
You bet, and I hope that added a few years to his life. I mean, or subtracted a few years. But
so you see him clearly, based on your remarks, as the purely kind of pernicious influence on to society and politics.
Well, yeah, he set up Fox News, and I can't even watch Fox News, even when I was a TV critic, for more than about 30 seconds. Literally, it's just pure poison, and I just cannot stand to watch it.
When the GOP took over the House, they immediately insisted that all the televisions in various television monitors in various communal areas all be on Fox News Channel. It's wild. It was one of the many things they did. They also, as you're aware, had Fox News Channel on all the military bases. Any kind of television monitor had to be on Fox News Channel. You see the power of media. It's interesting, Bill. It really is. We were talking about this the other day. It's a fact that if the media doesn't report something and decide that it's important, then the electorate oftentimes doesn't decide that it's important either.
Well, this is true, and Fox has had some impressive ratings until just the last year or so. MSNBC has been giving them a good run for their money. Now CNN is going to be really a strong thing with a guy named Mark Thompson running things.
That's right. He comes from print as well. He took the New York Times into the digital age. What is your thought about in this coming election and how the media is going to cover it, and the Trump trials at the same time?
Well, as you well know, Trump seems to be ratings gold. They cannot give up on the guy, and running stories about him. I mean, you haven't discussed this much, but this has been 5 years now where we've gotten nonstop coverage, mostly on MSNBC, of lawyers and his legal motions. It just doesn't seem to stop. I don't understand it. I really don't. But, he seems to be a ratings gold even over on the progressive networks, doesn't he?
Yeah. And, you mentioned MSNBC and the success of MSNBC. Trump leaves the race, falls away, however it happens. They become a super also ran. I mean, they really are there to help get the boogeyman that is Donald Trump. And when I say they're there for that reason, I'm saying, kind of as you are, he's catnip to the audience. And so you really struggle with what's the right thing to do, and I think and we suffer from it on our show. The audience wants news of this guy, and you end up doing maybe more than you might otherwise. And that bumps stories that might be more important out of the way. The minutia of the Trump legal travails, you certainly don't need day to day.
No. It just never stops. MSNBC, and I like MSNBC, but it's, almost nonstop Trump news. CNN, same deal, right?
Yeah. And when you go show to show, they're essentially tilling the same soil with different talking heads oftentimes, but yeah. It's pretty wild.
No, and I've got a great Trump story. I've got a great Trump story for you. I've been saving this for you.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
I heard this story from Harding Carter. Remember him?
Oh, sure, of course.
Well, when Trump took over the New York Post,
Harding Carter, just for everybody, he was in the Carter administration. Yeah,
wasn't the Carter administration?
Yeah, exactly.
The headlines in a New York Post used to be a very comfortable, Long Island, low-key, predominantly Jewish daily, just a very nice little suburban paper. Trump bought it, and immediately you had headlines like "Head Found in Topless Bar," which is the classic. There's some, or Pecker falls out. I mean, that was a David Pecker there. Trump appointed the head of the Inquirer. So Murdoch wanted to know why Macy's was not running ads in the Post. So he demanded a meeting with the president of Macy's. So the story goes, according to Carter, he goes into the president of Macy's office and he says, the Post has 4 times the circulation of the New York Times. Why aren't you advertising in the Post? And the president of Macy's looks around and he's very uncomfortable. He says, well, if you really want to know, your readers are my shoplifters. And, that's Murdoch in a nutshell.
That's really funny. That's very, very funny.
I don't know if it's apocryphal enough. That's a ding word. But
that's great. Yeah, we'll ding you on apocryphal.
It's a great story.
That is really terrific. I love it. Bill, love checking in with you. You're a great supporter of the show, so appreciate it.
Love the show.
Back to your clients with your meditation practice that you got going there, whatever you got going in the background. Yes. All right, Bill.
Thank you, my son. Thank you very much.
Bill Mann, everybody. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Great, I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Oh, dang it.
I'm Kim McAllister in for Mark Thompson today. Thank you for being here, and thanks to Bill Mann for that interview and Gil Gross as well. But right now, I'm always so honored to have him on the show. David K. Johnston is a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter. Of course, he's a best-selling author. He is also a instructor at Syracuse University College of the Law, and we are incredibly fortunate to have him on the Mark Thompson Show every week. David K. Johnston, everybody.
Hello, Kim.
Hi, how are you?
Well, pretty good, but I got to tell you, I got to fact check the guest who was just on. I don't know who Bill Mann is, but
okay.
The New York Post was never a suburban paper. It's published in Manhattan. It was never owned by Donald Trump. It was owned by a family and eventually came into the hands of Rupert Murdoch. And the story about shoplifters, which is probably true and has been reported in various places that are credible, was not about Macy's. It was about Bloomingdale's, a much more upscale department store, the one across the street roughly from Trump, a little bit off, but right near Trump Tower. So
facts matter. But you know what is interesting about that conversation is I found to be whether we should keep covering Trump stories, every little tidbit Trump, or whether it's time to just let it lie. But I feel like with my news background, people need to know they're not only are they interested in it, but every time the guy does something wrong, to me, it's like a slow building or a fast building case, evidence, piece by piece by piece, story by story. And the news person in me doesn't want to let it lie, although I understand the argument for, listen, he's no longer the president. Why are we harping on everything and covering everything? It just keeps his name in the news. Right. But I'm just caught in this middle between really wanting to put these stories out there and also not wanting to further his image.
Well, Kim, I think we have an obligation as journalists to cover these developments. The reason you are seeing it nonstop, especially in the evenings at MSNBC and CNN, and ignored at Fox, is largely about economics. The economics of television make it very inexpensive to have experts on, even paid experts. And I don't get paid for any of my appearances anywhere, TV or radio, by choice. But even with paid experts who do a terrific job, it's too much in my view. We need to. There are lots of other things that need to be covered and paid attention to, and I am glad that we are Americans who pay attention are getting a very good education in how the criminal justice system is supposed to work, the principles underlying it, the nature of laws that we are failing to teach in public education, junior high and high school. But I'm with you that it's too much.
Yeah. I want to get to, speaking of journalism, this story that you broke that really it's very applicable to what's happening to today. But I would be remiss if I didn't really start us off talking about this new impeachment inquiry into President Biden that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is now ordering. And I want to get your take on what you think. I mean, clearly, as far as we've seen so far, they keep saying bombshell evidence is coming, and yet nothing ever materializes. They don't seem to have much evidence, so it seems to be political. The White House is already criticizing the move as extreme politics of the worst kind. What are you thinking?
This is, in fact, politics. I mean, this is Alice in Wonderland. It's impeachment first, facts later. As Ken Buck, the very conservative Republican congressman from Colorado, said the other day, the House should not be doing this because there's no evidence. There is exactly zero evidence of Joe Biden doing anything wrong. Has his son Hunter Biden done things wrong? Oh, that's eminently clear from the record, but there is no evidence of Trump. And remember, the Republicans had a witness who turned out to be a Chinese spy. They have another witness who turns out to be utterly unbelievable. So there is no evidence of anything that arises to being an impeachable offense. So why is Kevin McCarthy doing this? He has a 4-vote margin. He has half plus 4 votes. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, who strikes me as certifiable, Lauren Boebert, who somehow is a junior high school mean girl, who doesn't know anything. Astonishing.
That's so accurate, that description.
Both of those members of Congress who say things that have no connection to facts we all should universally have as common knowledge. And a couple of other members will not approve any new federal spending unless there is an inquiry, an impeachment inquiry. And Kevin McCarthy knows that shutting down the government again would be a disaster for the Republicans. So interestingly, he did not say there would be a vote on an impeachment inquiry. Right. He said they would open an inquiry. He's trying to thread a needle here in dealing with the extremists who are really his bosses. It's not, at this point on these issues, his donors, the American public, the people who live around Bakersfield. It's the 4 votes held by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and he has to kowtow to them. And this is not going to go well for the Republicans, barring they're coming up with something. And, if Joe Biden took a bribe somewhere, then we should deal with that swiftly, forthrightly, and firmly. But there's absolutely no evidence of anything like that. There are a lot of people listening, I'm sure, who will say, oh, no, we know that. No, actually, we don't. Nobody has produced a shred of evidence, just unverified, naked claims that don't stand up.
I know this isn't the way it works. So I get that what I'm going to say is pie in the sky, but do you feel like, and I know an impeachment inquiry is just opening an investigation, but
Right.
does it seem to you like it seems to me that there ought to be some type of threshold that someone has to meet before you open such an investigation, that you shouldn't be able to just willy-nilly open it for political reasons, that you have to have a certain, something, you have to meet some type of standard in order to do it?
Well, as a matter of what's in the Constitution, no, you can just open an impeachment inquiry because there's no standard set. As it was said during the Nixon impeachment, which, remember, he was never impeached because he resigned.
Right.
That vote would have been unanimous against him. But it's of the impeachments we've had, and I teach this to my students, we've had 18 impeachments. Most of them were federal judges. One was a senator. All of them involved very serious misconduct. A judge in Texas who would hire onto his staff, a federal judge, women who were in trouble about issues like keeping their children when they had husbands with resources who were going to take them away. And a condition of keeping their jobs was giving him sex in his chamber wherever he asked for it. A judge who literally waged war on the United States government during the Civil War while maintaining his United States government position as a judge. Those are the kind of people that we should be impeaching.
Right.
And you need to have evidence first if you want credibility. So the law and politics don't line up here, but this is a good example of a problem that's not good for the country. The Republicans don't have any governing principles anymore. They have sold their souls to Donald, joined the cult, and they have become pro-Russia, pro-authoritarian, taking away freedom, which they're always, remember, freedom fries from 22 years ago.
Of course, when we were mad at France.
Right. Anti-police, anti-military. What we're seeing is that there were no real principles there. There were some people who articulated them. Hopefully the Democrats will not end up in a situation like that. They have been actually articulating principles: higher wages for workers, fewer economic shocks for workers, lowering the costs of medicine, returning manufacturing as much as possible to the U.S., shifting to a less polluting economy. So this is not at all good, and I don't see any good outcomes from this.
I'm not happy. I feel awful about President Biden having to go through it, but I guess,
he's a big boy.
He's a big boy and he can handle it. So I've been in news for a long time, worked at KGO for more than 2 decades. Yeah. And I will say that I never once was told what to say. Now, I was assigned stories. They would say, Kim, I need you to go out and cover whatever shooting, whatever political rally, whatever city council meeting, what have you. But my station, whether I was doing news or I was a talk show host fill-in or whatever I was, never said, don't say this, do say that, ever. You have a story that you broke a long time ago about the way the media covers news, how we cover it, why we cover it, and the ability for people to stick their fingers in the pie that really ought not to for various reasons. I would lay the story out, but I think you could do it much better. So
I have a very long piece that ran yesterday in the Detroit Free Press, which I worked for from June of 73 to June of 76, so 3 years. And shortly after I arrived in Lansing, Michigan, to be an investigative reporter in the state capitol, I heard that there was going to be a challenge to the license of the only TV station in town, a CBS affiliate. And I thought, well, that's worth one paragraph, and I'll stop by the station and talk to the the guy in charge for a few minutes and write a one paragraph item for a column we had. And I was locked into a windowless room for almost an hour. Then brought into the office of this guy, Harold Gross, who proceeds to tell me, you will not write about my station. You are prohibited and forbidden to do so.
Oh.
And I just politely looked at him and said, Mr. Gross, that's up to the editors of the Detroit Free Press, not you. and realized immediately, wow, there's something going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I find out in one day that every journalist in Lansing, Michigan, not just the locals, the people who work for the Detroit TV stations, and they all knew that Harold Gross was using news blackouts. I'm not going to cover you if I don't like you. Mm-hmm. And manipulations. He said he only wanted the mayor of Lansing on the air if his fly was unzipped. He only wanted other people in unflattering light. And that he sent his news director to tell a member of the city council when he was seeking a monopoly cable television franchise that if the guy didn't vote for Harold Gross, the owner, quote, we will ruin you. We will make it impossible for you to walk down the street and look anyone in the eye. We're that powerful. You do what we tell you to do. And so it took, another 6 weeks of work, but I had a huge story in the Detroit Free Press 50 years ago. I was 24 years old then. Lansing TV owner blacks out his foes. And on the 50th anniversary of this, plus a few days, I had this long piece in the Free Press about why this matters today. On broadcast, you must serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity. That's what the law says under the 1927 Radio Act. But cable, where we have Fox and on the internet, we have places like Newsmax, I guess it's called, OANN, places that just make stuff up, that smear people. There is no regulation, just as there is not with print.
Yeah.
And so I went through the story of what happened here. I am the only journalist in America who has caused a broadcast chain to shut down and go out of business. Harold Gross hired the very best lawyers imaginable, and I describe how good they are in the article. And up against them was a lawyer, freshly minted, 24 years old, had never been in a courtroom, who beat them. But it took 11 years. It's just that the facts were so overwhelming. Everything I reported was proven at the Federal Communications Commission in hearings to be true, and a whole lot of stuff that I didn't report on either because it was tangential, I felt, or I didn't know about it. And this business was sold. I quoted the mayor of Lansing at the LA Times when I was working there in 1984, and this all ended. I went back to Lansing to write about it, and Mayor Jerry Graves, who was one of the victims, said, so let me get this straight. The FCC found that Harold Gross did every single thing the Detroit Free Press accused him of and more, and he gets $48 million
to sell a station.
American Justice Grant. The stations were worth over $100 million. He had to sell at fire sale prices, but at least, in my view, the FCC should have just yanked his license and said, "You're out," and thrown him out the street. And for the stations themselves, he would have gotten some money, but nothing like the $48 million. The importance of this is that today we have huge numbers of people who distrust every news organization. Mm-hmm. Every day I see people saying, well, they just make it up at the New York Times. Clearly, these people don't read the New York Times, which is meticulously reported. Doesn't mean it's perfect. None of us are perfect. I'm sure you can look back at stories you covered at KGO in San Francisco and go, oh, I didn't really understand that, or I didn't, I wish I'd heard this other person speak. We all have those experiences. That's why we call it the first rough draft of history.
Right.
But the New York Times, the Washington Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, they are not in the business of making up stuff. And if you doubt that Fox makes stuff up, they just paid $787 million to settle a claim over this voting company they accused of all sorts of horrors. Another voting company has a case that's just as damning. And then there are individuals who Fox News did the same thing to and who are suing. And what's astonishing is we now have testimony and emails because of the first case, the one where the damages were paid, showing that Fox on-air people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Judge Jeanine Pirro, they knew that what they were saying was false. They knew it, but they said it anyway. And this is a real challenge to our democracy. Our democracy depends on, in the view of the founders, reasoned and rational debate. That doesn't mean that we won't have people screaming at one another from time to time and whatnot, but it has to have some basis in fact and reality. And doing what Fox did in going after these 2 women poll workers in Atlanta, who the FBI came and told the mother of the other woman was her grown daughter,
right?
You need to move out of your house. They're going to kill you. Not
so
Fox
scary.
News, but people who believe this garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. And it's the same as Harold Gross telling the city councilman, if you don't vote for, through his news director, if you don't vote for my cable TV franchise, we will ruin you. And this is a real problem. And it's bizarre to me that news organizations are unique in that they report these days. I mean, since my piece, which had a significant impact on changing the attitudes in the country about this, we report on our own foibles. When the Philadelphia Inquirer, a paper with such strict standards that they purchased the books they reviewed, they wouldn't take free books from publishers. That the Philadelphia Inquirer found out that its star political reporter got all these great stories because she was the mistress of the Democratic Party boss of South Philly. They did a 48,000 word
wow.
self-investigation. When the New York Times, when I was working there, had Jason Blair, this young man who just made stuff up.
Yep.
The paper ran a 14,000 word Sunday front page self-expose of how they failed to catch him. The LA Times made this corrupt deal after the new owners of the paper hired a cereal company, a breakfast cereal company executive as publisher who knew nothing about the ethics of newspapers. And he made a deal to share advertising revenue at something called the Staples Center in LA.
Right.
And the paper did a whole special section, 32,000 words, dissecting this corrupt deal, which led to the publisher leaving.
Yeah.
And by the way, he was so utterly corrupt that he had custom-made furniture as put in the office of the publisher that cost the reports at the time. This was not in print, but I mean, the newsroom were over $100,000.
Wow.
And he had it removed, boxed up, and shipped to his new home in Hawaii, where he was going to be the president of the Mormon Temple in Honolulu.
Oh, Lord.
And so the public needs to distinguish between people who make money lying to you, Rupert Murdoch, OANN, etc. There are lots of studies and articles documenting falsehoods that aren't just mistakes or misunderstandings. These are clearly deliberate, intentional lies for profit from the serious work done by the Associated Press, Bloomberg, the Washington Post, the San Jose Mercury. I guess they now call it the Bay Area News Group, BANG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people need to distinguish between those and understand that. Norah O'Donnell's CBS News at 6:30 in the evening is not what Fox is doing.
Right. Big difference. Let's talk a little bit about consequences for this type of stuff, because I was thinking about in radio, every year I had to sign this agreement that I wouldn't engage in payola or plugola, which is receiving money or goods or services for my endorsement, unless it's somehow sanctioned by the radio station, or receiving money to play certain things on the air, right? Whether that's audio cuts or whether that's music or whatever, they can't pay me to do it.
Right.
That's it. That's illegal. I get fired. I may get charged. I don't know what happens to me, but it's not good. So I had to sign a contract every year. Won't do it. What happens though in the news media, especially in television news media, if someone is, and it's not the same if you do it for money, but if you're doing it for, ideological reasons, or as the man you mentioned in Detroit, because you want power, because you think that you somehow have this powerful medium so you can hold it over everyone else and make everyone dance. What are the repercussions other than pulling a license? Why isn't it against the law?
Well, first of all, bribery and what's known as commercial bribery are against the law. Payola arose in the 1950s. There's a movie touches on this called American Hot Wax. Mm-hmm. Record producers, to get their songs played, would go to disc jockeys, and they would provide them with money, liquor, sometimes women, to get them to
the golden age of radio.
Yes, and the folks who were into this early made a lot of money by corrupting the system, and it led to congressional hearings and the passage of a specific law about payola. At legitimate news organizations, you can't take anything. I have never in my life taken anything more than a cup of coffee or a glass of water from people. But when I got into the business in the mid-'60s, journalists did lots of things, and people at not first-rate news organizations still do things like a promotional trip. Hey, we're Hawaiian Airlines. We'll fly you to Hawaii and put you up in a hotel for a week, and you can write for whatever travel magazine about life in Hawaii. As long as you disclose all that stuff, I don't have any particular trouble with it. But if you're writing a travel story for the New York Times or the LA Times, you're not allowed to take anything. You can't take a discount in the hotel room.
Right.
That doesn't mean the ethics are perfect. I mean, there are examples of, for example, some reporters I know who did very well in their careers because their spouse or the person they lived with worked in some field where they could feed them information about something.
Mm-hmm.
Or keep stories out of the news. But that's not the norm. The norm is really high ethical standards. And I know that you won't be shocked to hear that I have seen in newsrooms where the lowliest clerk has authority. I once watched the Business Day, that's the business section of the New York Times, news clerk dress down the executive editor of the paper in front of 40 members of the staff, and he knew he had to take it, and we all knew she had the right to do it. I've literally seen people come to fisticuffs. They didn't actually throw punches, but they were set to go over a comma and how a comma affected the way a sentence read, making someone look bad. And I think people have an idea that these things go on every day.
Those are my favorite newsroom debates. That's why you get in there, because, it's so fun to debate these things and to, and even ethics to figure out what's right here. If someone has given you free tickets to the fair because they want you to go and get people to come to the fair, is that right? Are you going to be able to, even if it's just something as simple as the fair, go there and give a review that has nothing to do with making the people that gave you the tickets happy.
Right. And, Donald Trump got a Wall Street Journal reporter fired. The guy went on to become a very wealthy hedge funder. But he got him fired by tricking him into something that was actually approved by the Journal editors. But once it came out, it looked bad. It involved his father getting a ticket to go to a heavyweight boxing match. Donald tried to get the first reporter who got onto him in a serious way, the late Wayne Barrett, to get off him. He offered him a free multi-million-dollar apartment in Trump Tower, and Wayne had no interest. Donald repeatedly tried to compromise me, and one day at my home when I lived near Atlantic City, a messenger appeared with a framed photo of my middle son standing there with Donald with a note written by Donald. It's on my son Andrew Drace's webpage. And I immediately realized he would use this to say that if I didn't take this picture and write what I told him to write, I was going to make him look bad in the Philadelphia Inquirer. So I told the editors about it and said, we have to pay for the photo. We called around to PR, 3 different casino PR people at different casinos. They all agreed that the photo and everything was $100 value. So I wrote a check for $150 and delivered it to the Trump offices, and they refused it. So we then made a donation in honor of Donald Trump to the local charity that fed poor people in Atlantic City, and wrote him a letter about it so he couldn't use this against me. There are politicians who do things like that to compromise people. Mm-hmm. And if you get compromised, you're probably going to lose your job, and you should lose your job for not having good judgment. And this goes on all the time. When I was writing my book about the casino industry, Temples of Chance, I was invited one night to dinner with a couple of casino owners and a guy who ran one of the top 2 competing topless show companies in town. And suddenly I find myself sitting in the high roller banquette at one of the topless shows with the two lead dancers on each side of me, who then want to invite me back to their place.
No.
Now, are you kidding?
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. But compromising journalists is something corrupt people try to do all the time.
Yeah.
And we do need to recognize that that's why we have to have these high ethical barriers. And one of the ethics matter. Look at what's going on in the Supreme Court right now.
I think that's why journalists are so outraged, because we have the standard for ourselves, and then when we see a Supreme Court justice doing the things that are happening, and I don't know if you saw the Politico story about Ginni Thomas and the dark money and all this. I mean, it's like, it pales in comparison to anything we ever would have thought about doing.
Right. When the first Clarence Thomas story broke, which I think is about a year ago now, I said on this show, there will be a lot more. If this has come out, a lot more. And we now know there is a lot more. I don't think we're anywhere near the bottom of this. We know that Justice Alito has written a piece saying, you have no right in Congress to tell us what to do. Basically saying I can be as corrupt as I want, and it's tough luck. I have a lifetime appointment.
Crazy.
Which is not true. It is not what the law or the Constitution says. You're violating your oath of office and your duty. And Clarence Thomas, who I've often said would make an excellent traffic court judge, which has offended some people who thought traffic tickets, has no business being on the Supreme Court. He was never qualified to begin with. It was the single biggest mistake made by George H.W. Bush when he was president. But we're seeing now that he and his wife, they're not just corrupt, they are actively soliciting payoffs. That's what the Politico piece describes. It doesn't say it in those words, but that's what it describes, actively soliciting. And there's a big difference, I think, between someone who passively receives something and someone who actively solicits. Right. They're really dangerous folks because they're completely out of control.
Yep. Yeah, that whole thing is frightening to me. Last question I'll ask you, and thank you for staying with us, is there's a new CNN poll that just came out, I saw. And some of the key things, takeaways from it, include that nearly half of registered voters asked, 46%, say any Republican presidential nominee would be a better choice than President Biden in 2024.
Yeah, this is an astonishing development. But first of all, I have to tell you, I'm not a fan of polls to begin with, and I don't trust polls because there's a pollster who lives here in Rochester, New York, which had a big history of polling businesses and still does, named John Geraci, who wrote a book called Poll, P-O-L-L, all caps, hyphen, Arised, Polarized. And one of the things he points out is that when calls are made, mostly the landlines, by pollsters, the response rate is between 1 in 100 and 1 in 200. So less than 1% of people are answering the pollster questions. That, he argues, inherently makes these polls unreliable. That's too small of a response rate. It used to be in the I did polling work when I was a teenager in my early 20s on the side, and the response rates were much higher. I think my memory is they were 25%, at least in the work that I did. Secondly, the Democrats don't know how to message. They just don't know how to message. I mean, we have rising real wages, especially for the bottom half. We have 3.5% unemployment. The inflation rate has fallen by half since June or July of 2022, when the peak was. Our economy is outperforming every other major country in the world. Lower inflation, faster job growth, more increase in income, and more increase in wages, even when you cut out the top where most of the wage growth has gone on, and I've written about a lot for the last 20 years. And people don't see that. And the other day, Joe Biden did push-ups with some little girls. They looked to be about 8 years old.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Donald Trump doing push-ups?
No, I cannot.
Every weekend when he goes home to Delaware, Joe Biden and his Secret Service retinue get on bicycles and he goes riding.
He's in shape.
He's
probably in better shape than I am.
He's in really good shape. He does not walk well.
Yeah.
Well, I don't walk well. If you were following me, I have an injury from 52 years ago.
Yeah.
That as I get older and older limits my walking, and I look a little funny when I walk. Mm-hmm. But what does that have to do with my mental capacity and my judgment? Nothing whatsoever. And there's a constant drumbeat about the age of Biden. Excuse me, he's only 2.5 years older than Donald, who's 2.5 years older than me.
Yeah.
And that's a nonsense argument. And we have seen where Biden, recognizing he has these verbal tics because he stuttered as a child.
Yeah.
And everyone I've ever known, and you've probably known, whoever came stuttering, they have these little oddities, the wrong word pops up or a phrase.
Right.
But once you recognize that he has these verbal tics, he speaks eloquently and clearly. Yeah. And look at the successes he's having place after place after place. Right. The only really effective economic sanctions ever imposed by the United States are the ones being imposed right now on Putin, whose economy is just rapidly collapsing because he invaded Ukraine. So I think that Biden will be easily reelected no matter who the Republicans run, barring some unexpected development.
Yeah.
And I think that if the Republicans run Trump, they're going to suffer severely down ballot all over the place. And compounding this and complicating it to understand what's going on, of course, is this drive by the Republicans to essentially eliminate all abortions, even to save the life of the mother. And I've been there making that decision. So it's not something I speak about abstractly.
Yeah.
One of my first wife damn near died in childbirth and was in a position where I had to make the decision about what to do because she was all drugged up.
Yeah.
Their efforts we're seeing in some states to criminalize this. Women should be prosecuted if they have an abortion. Alabama wants to, I don't know if they've enacted it yet or they're working on it, a law that if you drive someone out of state to get an abortion, you've committed a crime. And that attack on freedom, along with the discussions that you can see going on in Republican circles about ending birth control, those cannot go well for the Republicans. It's just not possible. Look at the vote results in the states, Ohio and Nebraska and others that have had ballot measures and what's happened there. So I don't like polls.
It makes my blood boil. I can't be the only woman in America who doesn't want a group of people to have control over my destiny and how my life works out.
Before we go, I just want to make one suggestion to the listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
If you go to the New York Times today, where if you register, you can get 10 free articles a month and read the obituaries, there's an extraordinary long obituary about a New York City cop who was on the take in the 70s, as virtually all the New York City cops were, or certainly a large majority of them. And he was one of the 3 New York City cops who cooperated in exposing how corrupt the NYPD was. And he was then framed for a murder. And the obituary tells the story of how he didn't even look like the person who was accused of the killing. He was clearly framed by the NYPD and the county prosecutor because he exposed this wrongdoing. It's really a story I would encourage people to sit down and read to understand how people who are legitimately blowing the whistle, and there are lots of illegitimate whistleblowers, the risks and dangers they run.
Yeah.
And being framed, a guy served, I think it was 32 years, because when he came up for parole and they say, well, you want to get parole, you've got to confess to the crime. And he said, I didn't commit the crime. So they won't let you out. He finally did when he was very old to get out. But judges who reviewed the case, tried to get him released and were stymied by other political forces. So just go to the New York Times website, type in the word obituary, You'll see the guy's name right away in today's obituaries. He's 92 years old when he died. And read that story and think about what that says about how corrupt some of our systems were or are.
Are is the active word there. David K. Johnston, thank you for being on the Mark Thompson Show, coming on even though Mark isn't here. I appreciate your conversation. I love talking to you.
Take care. Next week, we'll talk to you from Sweden.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Global Investigative Journalism Conference.
Oh, I love it. Okay, we'll see you from
Take
Sweden
care.
next time. Bye. Thank you to David K. Johnston. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the conversation. Big doings today. A big Apple news conference. We have information coming in about new Apple products, including the new iPhone, which gonna want to find out what's going on with that. So let me not delay and bring in Jefferson Graham, who's been monitoring this press conference and gathering information. What can you tell us? And hello.
Well, hi, Kim. If it's September, if it's after Labor Day, there are 4 new iPhones. And the 2 entry level, not much to talk about. The pro level models, that's where all the action is. In a nutshell, you've got a bigger telephoto lens finally, but it pales in comparison to what the Samsung Galaxy has. It only goes half as high. So it's
Still.
a 5x zoom. The Galaxy has a 10x. So I'm disappointed there, but there are many pain points that Apple has fixed or promises to fix with the new one. USB-C, which sounds like a small little detail, but we're going to be using the same USB-C cable that we use to charge up iPads and computers and other cameras. Now we'll get to use that with the iPhone. And the benefit to us is, for those of us who are photographers, faster charging and faster transfer. You'll be able to transfer your photos and videos way faster to the computer. So
That's
I like
cool.
that.
Yeah.
And a bunch of gee whiz wow stuff, like on the watch, they announced several new models of the watch. And if you go like this, you can take a picture, you could answer the phone. I don't know how it works. It all went by really fast. And you're saying, huh? And then the other thing that went by really fast and you went, huh, is the headphone jack is kind of back.
Oh.
Remember how upset we were about the headphone jack?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of headphones that can plug into USB-C.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get USB-C headphones, they'll plug right in.
And it goes.
And
Something else I heard about is glass shields that are a little tougher, which is good for me because I'm so klutzy with my phone. And also, can you talk a little about new satellite services? Is that for emergencies or is that for connectivity if you're in a dead zone just for normal, or what is it?
Ceramic shield is a new layer of protection they're going to put on all 4 of the iPhones. And as anybody who's ever cracked a screen can tell you, that's great. Thank you. We appreciate it. The emergency thing looks incredible. It's actually being run by the AAA, and it will work in a situation where you have no signal. And to those of you who say, well, you always have a signal. Well, let me tell you, viewers know that I went on a big 30-day 9-state road trip this summer, and for a good 25% of the time, I had no signal. Okay, so there's a lot of areas that have no signal out there. So if you do not have a signal, you'll be able to text to a satellite, the AAA. Okay, and the AAA will respond to you via text and satellite and then come and help you. And the service is free for 2 years. Thank you very much. There's nothing to complain about there. I mean, of course, they will be charging you eventually, but for 2 years, you've got it for free.
I think that sounds great. How much is it after that?
They're not going to tell you. They don't tell you. A lot of the stuff just flies by. So like iCloud, I talk a lot about iCloud, and it's $10 a month for 2 terabytes of service. Well, now they have 6 terabytes or 12 terabytes, but they never said how much it's going to cost, and I'm not finding it on the website as of yet.
To be determined.
I can tell you it's $15.99 if you get the top of the line iPhone 15 Pro Max maxed out with 1 terabyte of storage. If you go for the entry level 256, then it's $11.99, which is $100 more than it was a year ago, but it's also twice as much storage. And as anybody who takes a lot of pictures and videos know, you will run out of room. So you want as much storage as you can have.
Well, it's interesting that they'll charge for emergency services, but I mean, if you're a hiker or a boater, somebody who is out in dangerous situations and could need help in an area of low connectivity, that seems like whatever they charge might be worth it. One of the things I saw today is that they're coming out with their first carbon neutral product.
Yeah, my eyes kind of glazed on that stuff. They spent a lot of time talking about how wonderful they are environmentally, and I just go, yeah. Though it was a very interesting little skit they put together with Olivia Spencer, Octavia Spencer, that's her name?
Octavia,
yeah. She was great. She was Mother Nature, and she was yelling at Tim Cook and other people, and they were doing a pretty good job acting. It was a really nice skit. So, but I just wanted to get to the news. So when they said 15 minutes about how wonderful they are environmentally, I said,
yeah. I guess it's supposed to be an Apple Watch that's carbon neutral, and it's supposed to be faster, have better performance capabilities. Are we excited about this new Apple Watch or no?
You know, I have seen the Apple Watch not change much over the past few years, and every year they say it's new and improved. You know, I don't know. I mean, and the top of the line one is $800. It starts at $800. But I like that thing. That thing where you click 2 fingers and take a picture with the Apple Watch or answer the phone.
How do you like make sure that it's pointed in the right direction to take the picture you want to take?
It's a timer. You're using it as a timer. So like if you set the iPhone on a tripod and then run over to the other side and go like this, it'll take the picture.
Oh, okay. That's convenient.
Yeah, I want it. Oh, I don't know that I want it, but I think it sounds great. It does sound great. And then the other thing is that the mute button on the side of the phone is now an action button, and you're going to have pre-program things like mute and alarm and even taking a photo.
Are you talking about the mute button on the side of the phone that people accidentally click all the time and mute their phone when they don't mean to? That's poorly placed? Yeah.
Yes.
So now
that one.
So now it's going to do more stuff that we can do accidentally?
More stuff accidentally, and you'll have to program it, and I wonder how easy it's going to be to program it. Have you ever used the app called Shortcuts, which is an Apple app that will let you do things like we're just talking about right now?
No.
You probably haven't. It's hard to use. It's hard to make work. So I think this will be, I don't know, maybe it'll be easy. Maybe I shouldn't be so skeptical. But to answer your question that you haven't asked me yet.
Oh, here she goes with her little, look at that.
Yeah, you got that.
Yeah, that's cool, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that. Okay.
I know. Right. How is it going to work? So the question you haven't asked me is, well, Jeff, you want to buy the new one? Should you ditch the old one?
Are we going?
That's the question. Yeah, I want it. But, you know, they solved a bunch of pain points for me. And these are small things to many people, but they're big to me. They say there's going to be an extra coating to deal with the lens flare issue. The lens flare issue has been one of the biggest bugaboos for me with the iPhone, where you get that little green dot when you're doing a sunset. So they say they're going to fix that. I love it. They say you can plug a hard drive into the iPhone and move material around and record your video directly to a hard drive. Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. The 5x zoom, yeah, I think it's great. I just wish it was 10x, but I'll take 5x over the 3x. Bigger image sensor. For photographers, this is a big deal. I think there's a lot of upgrades there for people who like to take pictures and like to do video. For the average person who claims they just go online and send text messages and read their email, well then no, there's no reason to upgrade.
No reason.
I never believe those people anyway, but that's what they say.
How much is it?
It's also
what is it? The iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Pro, right?
Yeah, I think it's $799, $999, $1,099, and $1,011. $1,011. $1,200.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all sorts of rotating prices for the upgrade for the people that want to trade in their phones. They're claiming they'll give you from $570 to $650 on last year's model, which is fantastic if you could really get it. If you spent $1,100 for an iPhone last year and you could get basically half of it back, I think that's wonderful. The 13 they're claiming from 370 to 580. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not giving mine away for $500 or $600 because I needed a new phone. I bought a new phone. It works perfectly well. So why would I go pay an extra $600 or $700 for a phone, even if I get the, given I get the trade-in value for this one? That doesn't really. I mean, maybe it takes away the glare issue, but for me, that's not enough to spend $500 on something.
Right. Yeah. If you want to buy a new camera, this is what you're buying. You're getting a new camera.
I'll just wait. I'll wait until they tamper with my phone to make it not work before I go buy a new one.
I would say there's no reason you don't have to buy a new one. Certainly, if you're a fanboy and you want the latest and greatest, then yeah, sure. There were enough reasons there for me to want to get the new phone, which goes on pre-sale Friday morning. You can't buy it till Friday morning, and then it will be available the following Friday.
I almost think you kind of have to, though, because people will ask you questions. They'll want to know about it. They'll want you to review it. Like, you're one of those people that needs to have it. I don't need to have it. There's a lot of us that are just fine with what we've got, right?
Yeah, certainly. And then once we see whether all the things are promising, if they're real or not, I mean, we have to try that out and find out. One of the big things last year was this action mode on video that they claimed would give you super smooth footage. But the fine print was only if you run. You can't walk. You have to run with the iPhone to get that shot. And I don't know about you, but I ain't running to get the shot.
Moving around for different angles is about as far as you'll go, right?
That's right.
Do you think the reason that they changed the connection with the USB-C is that, do you think they did that specifically so that you could then plug it into a hard drive? Is that part of the plan?
No,
or is that just an added benefit?
No, they were forced to do this by Europe. Europe put out a mandate, said all devices have to be USB-C and you can't not have USB-C. So they would be breaking the law or having to come up with another version, which they didn't want to do. The hard drive thing is aimed at filmmakers, and they want to see pros shooting movies on the iPhone. And if you use it in a studio, and getting the footage off is a pain. And if you could record directly to a hard drive in a studio situation, I mean, why not? It's fantastic.
Anything else they covered other than the phone and the watch? Do they have any other announcements?
The fastest chip? No, they only did these two products. The fastest chip, the thinnest. They had every adjective was in there. But these were the only two products, which suggest that they'll have an October event to introduce the new iPads, which again, I don't think most people care about because the iPad generally doesn't change that much. Really hasn't changed since the original version. I mean, there's little features here and there, but a tablet is a tablet, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. All right, and does it come in the big size, this new one, or is it just one size fits all? Because
no, 6.1 and 6.7 inches. Can I just do a quick little plug that I will be talking in depth live at 2:00 Pacific time today on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/photowalks, all about the new iPhone. So I'll be taking all your questions. And so just wanted to
awesome. Can you say it again? So PhotoWalks TV, 2:00 on YouTube. And if you have questions about it, this is a perfect time to pop in and ask the questions if you're considering a new phone purchase, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for covering that news conference for us. I really appreciate you being here. Yeah, it's very interesting what they're doing. And I mean, I know a lot of people want the newest gadget in their hand, the newest technology in their hand. So it's interesting to hear what they have to say and how you feel about it.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Please join Jefferson Graham on PhotoWalks TV, 2 p.m. right here on YouTube. Thank you, Jefferson.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. Awesome. So, Tony, I think we have some people to thank. I did see Pinky roll through with a super sticker, and I do want to acknowledge it because I have been very remiss in telling you that the super chat is live, and also advertising themarkthompson.com, themarkthompsonshow.com, themarkthompsonshow.com, where the Patreon and PayPal links are. And of course, we're crowdfunded, so anything helps. But thank you so much to Asley. Yeah. Is it Asley? Oh my goodness. Asley Petrus for a $50 super sticker. So grateful to you, and I love your name, Asley. I've never seen that before. Thank you so much for that. I'm so grateful for your contribution to the show. It really helps us keep doing what we're doing. I think I saw Pinky roll through with one as well, for $1 a day. So thank you so much for that. Of course, you can make a monthly contribution on Patreon or PayPal, and we appreciate anything we can get. Helps us keep everybody here and doing what we're doing. So thank you for that. Oh, Tony, what a show we've had.
We did good today.
We did good.
A lot of stuff. We had a lot of guests.
I skipped the news, but that's all right. Tomorrow, super excited because we've got a lot going on for the Wednesday show. Of course, Mark is doing his last day filling in this week at KFI, so I think it'll be you and me again here. I
think Albert's in tomorrow.
Oh, is it Albert? Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Ditching me already, are you?
Yep.
One of the things I'm excited about, though, is that Mark recorded this interview with Tom Dreesen, and he is the comedian that opened up for Frank Sinatra most often. He's really cool. He has some great stories to tell. It's a long interview, but worth every single second. And I love it. One of the cool things about this interview is Mark kind of fanboys out. He is a big fan of Tom Dreesen. And so he's like, I'm so excited to talk to you. It's so cute to watch him do that, right? Usually it's me doing that. So it's cute to see him do that. He's really excited about this interview. So we have Tom Dreesen, a recorded interview coming up. Of course, we'll talk to John Rothman tomorrow on the show as well. That is Wednesday here on the Mark Thompson Show. But I want to thank you for spending your morning and afternoon with us. We've got the After Party Live coming up. One more hour of the fun stories. John Daly joins me for that. We will get it going right when this show ends. So please do join us there. Oh, look at you. It's Calvin Wong coming up with a super sticker for us to end the show. Calvin, you're so awesome. What does that say? Is that 5150?
Yeah.
Oh.
And a little crazy.
He thinks
emoji.
We're a little crazy, Cray, but that's okay, Calvin Wong.
A little? I'm more than a little crazy. I work in radio. Come on now.
Well, thank you, Calvin. Thank you so much for all the ways you support the show, giving us stories and being here in the chat and supporting us financially. So appreciated. All right, everybody, please head over to the After Party Live for the next hour of fun, and I will see you tomorrow
for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Here on the Mark Thompson Show. Bye, you guys.
All the time. Bye-bye.